everybody, welcome back for another video. Today I want to talk to you about your hit miss rate and are you realistic in terms of your expectation for what you can do under stress and under pressure. And everybody has this idea in their mind that everything is going to be, it's more of a slow motion visual. And I think we know from reality that things happen fast, things are moving, and the success rate is not going to be as high as you would think. There is data out there, and I've been researching on the computer here. I want to go through some of the data from several large city police departments in the United States. They account for every single shot that was fired. They determine the hit-miss rate for police officers, and they really investigated this to try to find out where those bullets are going. Are they hitting their target? Are they missing the target? And then they've also even tried to understand how the success rate is influenced by the fitness level, the amount of training that they have, how often they train, and things like that. There's really a lot of information that I want to go over, and we're going to walk through it right now. I think this should open your eyes quite a bit to be realistic about your less lethal use and how many rounds that you need to carry, and whether you need to be able to reload and things like that. So let's get started. All right, so one of the first things I just want to point out here is that there's sort of a misconception out there that a single less lethal shot to the center body mass at 40, 50 joules is, that one shot, maybe a second shot, that's enough to stop someone. And I disagree with that point as a general blanket statement, because I've seen too many videos of police shootings with penetrating bullets of different calibers, mostly 9mm, and it can take as long as up to 15 seconds sometimes for the person to fall, and it take many shots during that time. So with a less lethal, I mean, there is some data saying that less lethals can be quite effective and less than 5 shots. But the reality is when those are used in a police situation, the police is backed up by lethal force, and it's usually a team of people. So that person that is considering whether they want to continue may give up because they know lethal force is coming next. And so that's not really a fair comparison. But I do think that LEO data is quite informative when it comes to their hit-miss rate and their shooting. And again, less lethals are easier to shoot than firearms. They're easier to get back on target. They don't have recoil of any significant extent. So that's one advantage of a less lethal. But less lethals are slower to engage. They're bigger and bulkier. They're not going to be as smooth in terms of getting off your shots and things like that. So, and they asked the question whether police are accurate shooters, and the reality was that police really aren't all that accurate. More than 1/3 to 1/2 of their shots are misses. Now, let's let that sink in for a second. There was a study, Loyola University in Chicago did a study on the Dallas Police Department looking at 149 officer-involved shootings. And this was between 2003 and 2017, so over many years. And they tried to determine the number of hits and misses, but ultimately when they got down, they determined that 123 hits out of 354 rounds. So that's a hit rate of 35%. That is way lower than we ever expect to achieve. And that means that 231 of those rounds missed the mark. Did they hit someone else? Where did they go? That's luckily innocent bystanders are often not hit, but it can happen. So the Dallas, so that was in Dallas. In Las Vegas, a similar rate, 23 to 52% hit rate. In New York Police Department, looking at 170 shots, there was a hit rate of 44%. And so we're seeing that the hit rates are less than half. They can be as low as 1/3. And so that's really disturbing in some ways, that the police, who are professional, they're trained with their firearm. They're supposed to be practicing regularly. Most civilians, I mean, there are civilians that are actually obviously more trained and more dedicated than even some police officers. So, but in general, I think if you compare it to the average civilian, police officers are supposedly more trained. It did not seem to correlate with how often they went to the range. The data showed that on average, most police officers have never fired their weapon in service, and they may go to the range once or twice a year. Well, there's a lot of civilians that exceed those. So I'm just saying that the data seems to suggest that the shooting does not seem to be related to physical exertion on the body. Stress is certainly a factor, but they talk about anxiety negatively affecting shooting performance. And they indicated that the more training that the officers got in terms of handling stress and training under stress conditions, the better they were. But it was a perishable skill. Just like shooting, standing still in the range is a perishable skill. Your skill of handling the stress, they said after about 4 weeks, you start to lose that skill. So these are things that if you want to be serious and you want your hit rate to be high, you have to train regularly. But even police officers who are supposedly prepared, they're not hitting their shots. So that just raises the point that I want to talk about here, is that when you buy your less lethal launcher, how many rounds do you want to be able to shoot, and do you want to be able to reload? You know, I personally, if you look at the EDC carry for firearms, the general consensus that I get from a lot of people is that people like to have 10 rounds, somewhere in that ballpark. Yeah, there are very small subcompact firearms, pocket pistols and things, which you go for size for very specific situations. And then in those situations, you might get by with 6 or 7 rounds. But most people at EDC, they would like to have 10. Some people want 15, you know, so there's this range, but it seems to be that people want more than 10. So does the same thing translate to less lethal? Do you really want to have only 5 or 6 shots? Do you want to be able to reload if necessary? Well, we're not going to have a firefight, that's for sure. Less lethal is meant to be a hit and get out of there, whereas police have to engage the subject and come to a resolution, and usually they're having to pursue the subject, so the firefight will continue on. And it's a lethal firefight, and it's got very different consequences. So I'm not talking about you guys who have a less lethal that you intend to use it only in a life or death situation. That's a whole nother topic that I have very strong opinions about, and I definitely don't like the idea of using a 40 or 50 joule less lethal launcher against a person with a firearm or a knife. I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think it's a fair thing to do. But if you're reserving it only for those situations, then what good is a less lethal if you're only going to use it against a person who's a lethal threat to you? In that case, I think you should be carrying a firearm if you can, or you should be carrying something else in order, like a knife or something that you can use as a backup that is a lethal object. That's something that's not talked about a lot in the less lethal community, is using a knife as your lethal backup, because the less lethal is not necessarily going to be your best bet if the person comes at you with lethal force. I personally like to have the CO2 in the mag. I like to have that somewhere that I can find a safer space and I can reload if the person continues to pursue. And I like to have, 6, 7, 8 rounds. I carry a larger mag in my TCP, which carries 8 rounds, and you can have 1 in the chamber, so you can have 9 shots. I'm willing to sacrifice some power on the later shots to have more capacity. That's just me. But I think you should think about these things, because if you have, let's say, 6 shots, and your success rate is 30%, you're only going to be landing two of your shots. Let's hope those 2 are the first 2. But if your success rate really is like police officers in these live situations, and you're landing even up to 50%, With CO2-based launchers, your amount of power and good shots varies. And if you're doing rapid firing, I don't care what launcher you're using, if you're rapid firing, the CO2 will freeze and the shot efficiency will go way down. A lot of our testing is done with very slow. We shoot, we wait, we do a chrono, we talk, we do another one. It might be steady, but it's not boom, 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 boom. If it's a real situation, you're going to want to be rapid firing. I don't know how you stop yourself from doing that, because as the person keeps getting closer and closer, your tendency is just to fire more and more. The reality is you just get weaker and weaker and weaker. That's the biggest limitation of a less lethal pistol. So think about these things. Studies in these cities, these kind of studies are very important. They're linked below. I'm going to include a couple of different references for you to read. Don't just take my word for it. Look at these studies and think about it for yourselves. Come back here, comment, let's talk about it. I want to know what you think. Do you feel safe with a limited number of less lethal rounds? Or do you feel you need more? Do you need to be able to reload? These are critical issues that really determine your success and your ability to defend yourself with a less lethal. And notably, stress and anxiety, things that I've talked about in the last couple of weeks, those really hit home when there is a situation that you're going to have to put shots on target and you have to fire. And so if you're not paying attention to that and you're not training yourself for that on a regular basis, you won't be ready. And that's exactly what's happening with these police officers who are not training often enough. They're not quite ready to get all those shots on target. And it's the data is the data. So let's talk about it. And again, everybody, be safe, take care, see you next time.